Good morning and welcome back to another edition of Master Your Finances, presented by Certified Wealth Management and Investment. I am Kurt Baker, a certified financial planner professional located in Princeton, New Jersey. I can be reached through our website, which is www.cwmi.us, or you can contact me directly at 609-716-4700. This week, very pleased to have with us Robert Blanda, who's raised in Voorhees, New Jersey. After graduating from Trenton Regional High School in 1990, Robert was an intern at Warner Brothers, Geffen Records, and Polygram Records in New York City, and then attended Rutledge University, which is no longer in existence, on a 100% paid scholarship from the IBM Novell-owned and accredited school in Atlanta, Georgia, earning an accelerated certified network engineering degree in 1994. Robert continued to work with IBM, EduQuest, and for nearly 11 years before setting out on a 4-year consulting journey across the United States for companies such as Air Products, Core States Bank, and Merrill Lynch. Today, Robert and his corporate partner, Lori Steidel, own and operate CaddisArt, a debt-free digital marketing and cinematic video production company in Florence, New Jersey. Robert, appreciate you coming on today. I know we have a lot to talk about. I guess we could start by maybe giving us a little bit of your background and how you kind of were drawn into this business. I mean, it sounds like you weren't on the farm. I'm going to guess you didn't do a lot of network engineering as a farmer's son growing up. I'm just going to make a guess there.
No, but thanks for having me on. This is a great opportunity, and it's nice to talk to you again, Kurt. Growing up on a farm had nothing to do with my education, but it certainly formed a very solid work ethic. That's for sure. Up at 4 a.m. and bed at 9 o'clock, and even during the school year, it was very difficult. So it was a very, very hard childhood, working 1.5 jobs, I'll say, and, going to school and still trying to get straight A's and so on and so forth. So that, that right there should teach you a little bit about how often my weekends even I'm up at 4,
Well, that's good. Yeah, good work ethic is great. I mean, I honestly, I think that's a key thing just for all of us. I mean, the more that you do, and the more habits we develop that are positive habits, and work ethic is a great one. It just becomes part of your routine, and so you get up and you jump right in, you get it done. And it sounds like you were working a lot of hours. And I know on a farm, the things don't wait for you, right? I mean, if you need to get the eggs, they're not going to wait. Right? They're gonna just keep coming whether you like it or not. You're gonna have to go pick them up, right? The crops need to be taken care of. They have their own little schedule, so they don't really, you can't adjust, right? You got to work to the schedule, and it's got to get done. Yeah. And so I mean, that's obvious, and that's one of the main things I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't have trouble learning initially, is that you have all this freedom, but then you have all this freedom, so you have to set your own schedules, and you have to really do all that. So setting up a good work ethic and getting good habits in place early, I'm sure, has been very helpful to you throughout the years. So how did you transition from that and being a restaurant owner? I'm assuming that a lot of stuff you grew on the farm. Maybe did that go into the restaurant that your father had?
Yeah, some of it, not all of it, of course. Okay. And again, I probably spent way more time at the restaurant than I did on the farm. In fact, there was people managing the farm at the same time, so I can't take absolute credit for that. So, but yeah, once I was ready to graduate high school, I had to make a decision about what I was going to do. And I certainly didn't want to work in the restaurant business my whole life, because I know people that have, and while being a noble profession is hard work, and I didn't see myself, gaining any kind of super salary by working in a restaurant. I give them all credit, by the way. People that have owned them for 20 some odd years, I don't know how they do it. I
absolutely agree with you. I know a number of people that work in the restaurant business. They work very, very hard for what they do. And I'm so glad they're out there doing that every day, because I enjoy going to the restaurants, that's for sure. And I know it is a hard job. So you grew up with it. So you pivoted at that point, right? So when you got out of high school, what kind of drew you to the tech side? It looks like kind of got drawn into that a little bit, right?
Well, I always loved the audio video side of the world, and when I went to work for a local contractor who had contracts with these record companies in New York City, they decided that once I was able to, for the beginning of the summer, so to speak, they would shoot me off to New York City, and there was a shared apartment in New York City that the interns would use. So the interesting part about that is that I actually got to work at not just Warner Brothers, or not just Geffen, or not just Polygram. And I think Atlantic Records was spewed in there somewhere, but it gave me the opportunity to meet all the people at all 4 companies, number one, and see what they were doing. So, excuse me, a lot of times the Geffen would ask me what Polygram was doing and what are they working on today, because they were competitors, but we were still contractors for all 4 companies. It was interesting. But most of my days were spent splicing tape, which by today's standards, pretty boring. It doesn't even exist anymore.
Actual tape, like the old days? You had to actually splice it together?
Yeah, it was 32-track, 2-inch tape. Goodness. Yeah, it was interesting.
That was a skill. I remember that. That's a real skill.
I had razor cuts on my fingers, and after a full day. But it was, oddly enough, we shared this apartment, which was above a deli on, I believe it was 8th Avenue. And, every time you'd come home, it smelled like onions,
Oh, my goodness.
Everything smelled like onions. But but it was a good background. It laid a really good foundation for all that. So I had met a team from IBM that offered me some opportunities to get an education and to work for them. And this was their EduQuest division, which was the direct competitor of Apple at the time to get into the K-12 market. So in fact, IBM EduQuest did really well for a long time. They were outselling Apple's Apple II products in the classroom, and teamed up with Novell at the time. They were creating what's called courseware. It's software for K-12. And we would have to go out and install the servers, and eventually I had a team of my own, and it was like 12 guys and me. I would set up the server, they would do all the workstations, the cabling, and for each classroom. And then we'd have to connect all the classroom. Now, this is way before Ethernet even existed. This was it was called 10base2, which is it was very antiquated BNC kind of telephone cable that we would have to literally get up in the ceilings and crawl from one classroom to the other and drop the cable down and run it from there. So it was very interesting. We were very back in the day. So yeah, we did that. I did that for a long time, and during the time that I worked for IBM, they sent me down to Atlanta. And it wasn't one long 4-year stretch. It was back and forth. But they paid for my education and paid for me to get my CNE, which is the Certified Network Engineering program that they had, which today really is kind of worthless because the technology has changed so much. But they paid all that, and I made a salary, which was really nice. So
no, that's fantastic. Yeah, you're bringing back memories. I remember when Novell was like the network, right? I mean, it was like that's what everybody wanted to set up, and nowadays you just they send you the equipment, you plug it in, and it seems to work pretty well, at least from a basic standpoint. For most people, I know it gets more sophisticated than that, but we've come a long way from like having to spend all that time setting these networks up. It was a real, you had to pay people to get it up and running. It wasn't something you just plug in and have it work.
Right.
So
that's true.
Yeah, so I understand that. So it's great. So basically you had this great opportunity. You went to New York City as an intern, and you met all these people, and you found that's where you got the opportunity. So I think a lot of times young people think, what do I do to get the next job? But you put yourself in a position to meet a lot of people, and I think that's really key for young people in their networking. And ultimately it led to, the EduQuest over at IBM and really kind of started your whole career, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, it was definitely a jump off point. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. So once you were with IBM, I don't think you're there anymore. So what happened after IBM?
After IBM, I decided to go back to consulting a little bit with a company called CompuCom, and they still exist today. In fact, my brother worked for them for a short period of time. CompuCom was, they had dipped their toes in a lot of different companies, and one of them was Merrill Lynch, and I remember being in the private portfolio group. It was kind of 2 doors down from the trading desk, so it was always kind of noisy. The day traders, and I had some idle time, and really back in the time, this is when the internet is fresh and brand new, and so I started to really dislike IT support. It was taking a toll on me. It was extra hours. It was a lot of frustration, especially when you're dealing with financial people that need their computers up and running. So at some point, I had sat down at my desk and had some idle time, and I learned about this new thing called HTML, and I was working in the first versions of Photoshop, and decided to maybe try to make my own website, because maybe now I can kind of crack out that creative side of what I was doing, because let's be honest, there's not a whole lot of creative in IT. So there really isn't. I mean, unless you figure out a great way to wrap a cable, which is pretty boring. Yeah. But
normally we get creative in IT, it doesn't work out well.
Yeah. Well, the best part about having a creative side, about having a creative side and having IT experiences, there's not many of us out there. Right. It's usually one or the other,
That's true.
You ask for a web designer and you'll get a graphics person. You ask for a web developer, you get a programmer. So there's two different people altogether.
Well, originally to start up a website was not like it is now. You really had to be pretty technically savvy to build a website. I mean, that was not, even today, there's a lot of tech side to it, but you can put up a basic site pretty easily now. But a lot of that's templated, and people forget just how complicated these sites are behind the scenes. They're actually pretty complicated.
Yeah, so in fact, only major corporations really had a public-facing website, such as, Merrill had their own. In fact, they had an intranet and an extranet, and then you had, the major companies like AT&T. So, of course, I'm sitting at my desk while I'm learning this stuff. So there's a protocol called FTP, which just stands for File Transfer Protocol. It's a way to get your local files on your computer up to that web server so they can be served to the public. So I looked at the AT&T website, which back then was very, very rudimental. It was just rudimentary. It was awful. It was just bad graphics, but it served its purpose at the time. So I said, let me see what makes this thing tick. And I found the file path to the server, and I'm sad to say that I actually broke their website. And thankfully there wasn't much cybersecurity back then. In fact, It was actually a Unix server that was just left open for anybody to get in, and that's exactly what I did. I just wanted to poke around and see what made it tick, and I deleted some files and moved a directory by accident or something along those lines, and I went back to check the website on the public side again, and it wasn't there. It was producing a 404 error, which means it couldn't be found.
Right.
So here I am. Here I am at Merrill Lynch, and I'm like looking over my shoulder going, they know where this came from. I mean, if they traced it back, they could figure that out.
Sure.
So the next 3 days, I'm scared out of my wits, that I'm going to get arrested or something. Nothing ever happened, but
yeah, they probably fixed it. Once they figured it out, they probably fixed it, as you know. But all right, Rob, this is fantastic. Now that you broke the site, we'll figure out what you've learned from that, I guess, and we'll come back in just a few minutes. You're listening to Master Your Finance. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I am Kurt Baker here with Rob Blanda, and we're talking about your transition, I guess. At this point, you went from tech into learning a little bit of HTML, and before the break, I guess you accidentally brought down the AT&T website for a period of time.
Yeah, so, unfortunately.
But we learn, right? Unless you tinker, you don't learn. A lot of people forget that's actually a key to learning, right? To put your hands on stuff, play around a little, you figure out what works, what doesn't work. Ultimately, that does make you a better web designer. Unfortunately for AT&T, you learned on their site. But so once you it sounds like you really got into this. You're using your tech side and creative side together, which the web is excellent for that, right? You kind of get a blend of both of those. So what did you do next after you started learning about web design and getting better at it?
Well, I'm still networking this whole time and meeting new people and trying to break into that creative business, which I knew off the bat would be less money than actually working in IT, because I was really headed towards, upper tier positions in different companies that I could have taken. I just wasn't ready to do that. So I had met some people that introduced me to other web developers, and then you go visit their offices, and they it's like not to use that same analogy again, but it was like Apple versus IBM, where you had the creative people and then you had the tech people, but they're working in kind of the same office. And, let's be honest with you, it's apples and oranges, to be honest. Trying to get those people to get along and work together, that's a whole different ballgame. But recognize the fact that they are two separate entities trying to create one product. So I really spent a lot of time with the creative people there, and eventually I took some part-time work with a company in Cherry Hill. They're no longer around. But I ended up being their lead graphic designer, and I worked hand in hand with the development team to make products that they had customers for. So I really dove hard into Adobe Photoshop in its infancy stages, back to version. This was before the CS line, before the Creative Cloud. It was like version 2 or 3. I can't even remember. Oh. That's made quite a lot of changes over the years. But once I became kind of an expert on that, I was able to share that and still understand the tech people and create standards for that company for file naming schemes and to keep things organized on the servers and so on and so forth. So I became a pretty used asset. I'll say used because they just kept yanking me in different directions. But after that, I said, I can really now I don't need any of these people to be successful anymore. So I kind of branched off and left that job to start my own adventure. But prior to that, I had to build an e-commerce website. So they were literally selling products on the website, and photography became a part of my everyday. So, you go out and get yourself a good camera. And at the time, it was switching between film and digital. It was just the kind of that crossover period. Went out and got some great camera gear. Then later switched over to digital. Literally became a photographer. And you don't just become a photographer. I did my homework. I did my research. I worked with great photographers, doing everything from product photography to executive headshots, weddings. Oh, and Kurt, I'll never do another wedding again if they pay me $1 million.
I've heard that before.
So again, now we're taking all this technology and kind of mending it together. And it was 2004 at the time. And I said, I'm going to start my own company. That's it. I'm going to be in business for myself, and I'm going to try this on my own. And I had a little backup from IBM in the bank account just in case. Long story short, it was pretty successful. When I say pretty successful, it was more than I'd expected. Mm-hmm. And back then, if you were earning $50,000-$60,000 and paying your bills, and I was working from home, it was worth it. It was worth every penny. Right. So, or every minute, I should say, because I worked long, hard hours, and my current wife at the time was also working from home. So of course we were at each other's throats. So we ended up renting an office in Sewell, New Jersey, which is down South Jersey. And I hired a couple of people to help me out because we were starting to get busy. Now, we actually shared that office with another company, which was an IT company, and they were feeding us business. So now we're starting to get really busy. And I honestly was overwhelmed. I started hiring more people, and then you have to kind of figure out the skill set that you really are looking for, but you won't know that until you get them in there, So we had, it was a young woman from Korea who barely spoke English, but was one of my most valuable employees because she really knew code in and out. So she was kind of my left hand. But my right hand was more of a project manager, and she was great with the clients. And so she was kind of my brick wall between having to talk to the clients and allowed me to do the production work. And oddly enough, she had left for a teaching gig, sometime short after that. And now I think almost 15 years later, she's now back with CaddisArt, working with us full time, and she has a part ownership in the company. So if anybody has called our office and talked to Laurie, she's just something else. I could not do this job without her, hands down. Yeah. So Yeah.
You brought up a lot of interesting things as far as starting up and transitioning from a a concept to saying I'm going to do this. But I noticed a couple pieces in there you put in that are really critical. One is you had kind of IBM. You had a little bit of a backup. You had a little bit of a cushion there, right?
Yeah.
You also looks like you set up some kind of an affinity relationship with this IT company where they could help to feed you some business. So you, through your networking, it looks like that's a really big part of this, right? One is you financially had a little bit of a backup just in case there is a startup phase, regardless of what you're doing.
Sure.
When you transition from working from somebody into your own business, there's always a little bit of a dip until things really get rolling. Even if you start off immediately, right? Because you still got to bill them, you still got to get paid, you still got to do the project. So sometimes people underestimate that, but it sounds like you planned for that. But you also were networking in order to, the IT. I think that was great, right? So how do you? And the other thing I saw is that it sounds like you found some appropriate talent right away. So you want to touch on a little bit how you put all those pieces in place before you actually stepped off and said, okay, I'm on my own now. Because you probably did some. It sounds like you did a little work ahead of time on that. Am I wrong on that?
I was doing side work at nighttime, and that was great. It was a great opportunity to fail because I had that fallback. So if I didn't know how to do something, it gave me time to learn it. If it didn't exist, it gave me time to write it. And as I did that, I was reaching out onto these these bulletin board systems and talking to people, and I kind of kept it local to New Jersey. So I had the opportunity to meet people that were local. So after I kind of started making money, I'm like, do you want some part-time work? Or, so I ended up with, ultimately, I think we had 5 or 6 people once we were in Sewell, and, some part-timers, some full-timers come and go. And, with that type of business, since it's new, you have a lot of turnover.
Right.
You don't know what their capabilities are until you really put them in that line. But, but that's pretty much how we got there. The focus in the beginning was governmental contracts, mainly municipals and counties. And now there's 52 municipalities in New Jersey. And it was our goal to hit every single one of them. And we did hit every one of them. We didn't bring them all home because there was 2 other companies that were competing for that business. And I'll never forget it. So, you end up at a trade show like the New Jersey League of Municipalities. That was our biggie. We always brought home a lot from that because we would show off how to build websites for those clients, specifically with the code book available and a registration process. And then you broke it into all these different categories like pet registrations and bicycle thefts and, all these little, and the police department. So they were all a part of this big umbrella of one package that we sell to these townships. And we sold quite a bit of them. And to this day, I still have 4 or 5 of them. Mm-hmm. And they've been with us since day one. And, but then you start getting the little mom and pops. They come in and, they see that price tag they want to run. So we had to kind of dumb it down and make a package that we could just easily kind of deploy as a template for the little guys until they want something custom, and then they grow with us. And again, there's companies that started off as mom and pop that are bigger now that we still have to this day after 16 years of building websites. So
one thing I thought was interesting is you started off with government, and anytime I hear people talk about dealing with government agencies, they talk about bureaucracy, they talk about how long it takes, how difficult it is to deal with them. It sounds like you target them initially. Was there a specific reason that you thought that was better? I know it sounds like you set up a template for everybody, which it sounds like that's a great business plan. But was there a reason you said, let's go after the municipalities?
Actually, I don't remember the decision to do that, but I knew that they were lacking in that area already, number one. And number two, it was a bigger business model that had the opportunity to attract county level and then state level and so on and so forth. So I thought there was an opportunity for growth within our company by showing what we could do.
Okay, so you saw a need, and that often happens, right? The private industry starts to develop websites or whatever the case may be, new technology, and the government agencies tend to lag, right? They don't want to be first in because they don't know what's going on, right? They're like, I don't want to do that yet. I don't know what's going to happen. So once it's kind of a proven thing, like, okay, we're ready, and people are complaining, hey, look, I can't register my dog, on your site. Why do I have to come down now? Everybody else I can do it online, right? And so they go, okay, I guess we'll update and we'll spend the money and we'll do it. But it sounds like it was very successful. And so how did you find that as a business dealing with the municipalities? It sounds like, I mean, how did you find that to be?
It's funny because a lot of I'll say, first of all, the whole voucher process was new to me. Purchase order voucher. Back and forth before you got a check. But we wanted to get them off and running quickly. We we could essentially build a website as long as we had their information and have it up and running within a week. And they're rather large websites because a lot of different departments and
right.
So. That everybody was net 120, even though our invoices said net 30.
Right.
So sometimes it was tough getting paid. Again, some townships are better than others, and some would pay right away, and I never had a problem. I sprinkle a few schools in there that we did too. They tend to be the worst. Getting that cash flow to be steady.
Well, that's the bureaucracy. That's kind of, I guess that's what I was alluding to, is it just takes a long time for some of the processes to take place. So
especially when you got to make payroll,
Yeah, you just got to plan for all that stuff ahead of time. But overall, it sounded like you set up a good template, you ran with it, and so excellent idea, great way to get started. We'll take a little break here. You've been listening to Master Your Finances. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I'm Kurt Baker here with Rob Blanda of CaddisArt. And last segment, we were talking a little bit about how you got started, how you focused on municipalities and set up really a robust template for them, went out, sold to them, went to their actual association type meetings, which I'm a huge believer in. We do that for our nonprofit. Go to where your clients are, right, and find them and create something niche for them. And you did that. So after you had that huge initial success, how did things go from there? I know every business seems to have, ebbs and flow. I mean, you got that going. So what did you do next? Did you find any challenges after that?
Yeah, of course. I think every business goes through this little dip. We found that the payroll was killing us a little bit. That was first. So as much as I absolutely hate to let good people go, you kind of have to at some point. So I think we ended up after taking a dip, and we had problems getting payment from certain customers, and of course I'm back to doing all the production work. So I'm not out there selling. So it was kind of a chain reaction as to why the business wasn't doing well. And now in hindsight, I'm looking back and I know what I did wrong, which was a great learning experience. So at one point it was getting bad enough that I had to make sure that the company stayed on its feet, and I didn't have to let all of my employees go. So one of the important things that I think I did during that time was I said, okay, who's the biggest liability here? And that was me. I was the one that was making the most. I was, so what I did was I said, what happened if I took myself out of the equation? So, and I put someone in charge to do the everyday administrative tasks. I put someone in charge of managing the project itself from a production standpoint. And then I said, let me go out. I'll get a full-time job so I can take myself off the payroll entirely. So that freed up some of the finances to keep the company afloat without having to let the people go, which was my biggest concern. So I did that, and I got a full-time job, and I was happy. Now I have benefits and everything through this other company, and all that pressure was relieved from CaddisArt, and now it started to run pretty well. It was self-sustaining, with monthly fees coming in on a regular basis for hosting and all the domains, all the recurring fees, and then put on top of that all the new production work coming in. It was starting to work well, and I was still in touch. Probably not as much as I should have been. So when I got a full-time job, and actually it was a couple in a row until I found what I really liked, and that led us back to, I guess, February of 2019 was when I officially came back on full-time. So I decided I needed to just go and make sure that everything was up and running the way it should be. And to my surprise, it really wasn't. There was a lot of accounting problems. There were, certain jobs weren't insured properly. And anyway, long story short, there were issues that had to be fixed before I knew I could really make sure that this business was where it should be. And I did. I cracked down, and what I did was I had to let someone go. That particular person was running the day-to-day and not doing a very good job, in my opinion. So after I let that person go, all this administrative fell back in my lap once more, and I said, I need to get some retainer clients to keep that money flowing in, which I did, and hire a project manager to make sure that everything that was being requested of us got done. So that person was fulfilled by a very, very nice young lady that we hired before Laurie came back, and she did a fantastic job. But after that, Laurie started freeing up all of my time so I could do several things. A, develop new products. B, get some of the hardcore production work done that I just didn't either trust anyone else to do or felt that no one else could do it. And so we started developing some new things, and then we also started to change the focus of the business because, again, going back to my photography days, I love that creative side. I still wanted to do graphics and video editing and grab some good camera gear. So that's exactly what we did. Now, we didn't drop any specific function of our business. We just added. So if you look at CaddisArt today, we've got a whole plethora of skill sets that are handled by either me or Laurie or someone else. We've got some contractors coming in that help us out on occasion, and we try to keep that overhead low. And now we're hiring camera operators, which unfortunately are come and go. They're a high turnover rate because it's one of those jobs that pretty much it's almost like working at McDonald's, where once you learn the job, you can just pick up and go somewhere else and do it. Whereas the production work and the graphics and the video editing and the style that I wanted, which was cinematic, and I'll get in that in a minute, I wanted to maintain my level of creative process. So I had to really make sure I depended on specific people to do specific things. So we basically filtered out everything, let people go, and we said, we got to start from scratch.
You just point out a number of things that I think are important for entrepreneurs to understand, or people starting a business. One is that you were able to set up the business, it may not have been 100%, in a fashion that you could step out and literally go get a full-time job. Although when you came back, it wasn't being run quite the way you wanted to, which means you probably didn't have the ideal person in place. But that's actually what they tell us as entrepreneurs. At some point, you want to get your business to the level where you could literally not have to be there and it would still run. And the fact that you replaced your day-to-day person, brought in the project manager, and now you have Laurie in there helping you out, which now allows you to go out and focus on new products and doing projects that basically your highest and best use, things that you can do that maybe nobody else would be able to do. And these are all lessons that, you can talk about them all day long, but it's really until you live it. I think you really understand it, right? In my opinion, I know that I've been through many of these cycles and I understand that. So, I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think what you pointed out is exactly what I was trying to say. Then you just said it better. So, but this also prompted some conversations with our CPA, who we'd had since the day we incorporated. And he said, because I had all these accounting problems now. So, of course, the whole QuickBooks thing is a mess. It's not matching up with what the bank is. So I'm going crazy. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And there was some problems that I care not to divulge in this conversation. But today they're all fixed. So once we got all those problems fixed, I sat down with my accountant and said, what could we do to make sure that every single time we do something great, we can invest back in the company again so we can do more great stuff? So... Right. And he gave me some great pointers, some great tips. And remember, we are 100. We've always been, almost always, 100% debt free. And not a lot of companies can say that.
Right.
The only thing we had at one point was a revolving line of credit for payroll when our payroll was high. So other than that, we've never taken a loan. We paid cash for everything. We made sure that we were very frugal in our spending, and made sure that, for instance, our hosting farms where we host all of our websites, we got the best deal on. We shopped around who had the best speeds, who had the best this, that, and the other thing. Mm-hmm. So we were very frugal, and we absolutely stayed, and to this day, 100% debt free. We don't owe anyone anything.
Yeah, another thing I think that you pointed out that I didn't mention was that you started setting up people on retainers, and I preach this all the time to small business owners, including our nonprofits. Like, you have to develop, in my opinion, you have to find ways to develop a recurring stream of reliable income just for yourself or your business, something that's pretty reliable. And I think retainers maybe helped you with that. I know, subscriptions. There's lots of things that most businesses can do to try to encourage their current client base to continue to engage with them, right, in one way, shape, or form. Because they probably want to. If they like you and you're doing a good job, they would love to continue that relationship, right? So I think that's a really important recurring. I mean, restaurants learn this. Most of their business comes from repeat clients, things like that. There's a lot of businesses out there that you point to it, and really, until they get that recurring stream coming in, they're struggling, because as soon as something a dip, they're in trouble, right? Because all of a sudden, wow, what's going on, right?
Yeah. So there's two sides to that, Kurt. There's the hosting fees, and some of our customers pay monthly and some pay yearly. Right. The hosting fees were the smaller side of that. So, if you take all of our hosting fees from, 1 year, it probably would equal 1 month of one of our good retainer clients. So It was still nice. It was the butter on the bread, but it wasn't the bread and butter.
Right.
So, and by the way, kudos and thanks to the Princeton Mercer Regional Chamber for keeping me on. I literally wanted to get back to running my business, and they're like, no, you can't leave us. Yeah. So we figured out a way to make it work for both of us. So again, they're one of our retainer clients, and they're great folks over there. And God bless everybody over there. And Peter Crowley, especially, a very approachable guy. Love him. I absolutely love Peter. And
they're amazing. I agree.
Oh, geez. And you know what? They run a neat ship over there. I think it's very, very, it's different than any other organization that I've ever worked with.
That place has exploded since I've been a member. I've been a member a little over 10 years, maybe 11 now. And it's just been amazing. The development and the improvements over the years have just been incredible.
Yes, I agree.
And I know you've been part of that. So
thanks.
Kudos to you too, because I know you've been kind of working the framework under there.
Well, yeah, I came in just as a communication specialist, and I ended up showing them, like, no, we could do this here. We don't have to farm this out. I can do that. I can do this. I can do that. So everywhere from the website to the graphics to the signage to the even the digital billboards, everything that they needed to do, I had that capability already. And I'm like, so I think essentially I was saving them a ton of money, just and staying on board. So when I left, I didn't leave for any bad blood or whatever. I left because I really wanted to go back and pursue and make sure CaddisArt was back on its feet. So when I left, we talked about it, and we decided to make him a retainer client. Now, to this day, I mean, I struggled for a long time in the beginning there until Laurie came back, and then I sat down with Laurie for days and taught her every single thing that I do for the chamber, and now she's doing 80 to 90% of that.
Wow.
And thanks for her, because it would be too much for one person to handle. To be honest with you. But, you take that, and it allows me to go off and film these documentaries and these interviews with people that, by the way, we're Amazon partners. Amazon will say, we have a filmmaker that's building this film, but he's out in California. Can you interview this person? So I'll just do that little snippet of work for them. I shoot it off, and it ends up in some film that I don't even know where it goes half the time.
Well, that's amazing. We got to take a little quick break here, but when we come back, we'll definitely talk about some things you've been doing, since you basically went back full time. And I know the company is expanding, and you're adding a lot of things. And we've got the thing also how you've been managing through a little bit of this disruption, let's just say, over the last few months, and what you've seen as far as your company goes and the overall environment. You're listening to Master Your Finances. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I'm Kurt Baker here with Rob Blanda of CaddisArt. And before the break, we're talking a little bit about how you had a little bit of a difficult time. You decided to take on a full-time job, and when you came back, just a little while back, a year or so ago, the person you had worked for a little bit, they actually were kind enough. You set up a retainer agreement, right? And so you started setting up different agreements to kind of help you with a base income, and then that allowed you, having the structure in place, and you hired Lori, and you got some of the people in place that really kind of fixed some of the things that were not operating ideally when you were away. But that opened up your time to work on some new projects that basically your expertise was needed for those things. So what are some of those things that you found that you could actually do once you kind of got all the other things fixed and you could kind of move forward and all the pieces where they needed to be?
Yeah. So one of the important things that I probably skipped over was I really have this deep love for video production and documentary storytelling, and I had this love for video production in addition to photography and all the other skill sets that we had brought to the table. But I took a different approach to video production, as you know, than most companies do, and I wanted everything to be like a movie. I wanted it to be cinematic. I wanted it to be very, very visually appealing. It wasn't just, a news camera where you've got footage and you're just slicing it together and handing it off to the customer. I wanted it to be great. I wanted to learn how to edit in 5.1 Dolby Digital DTS surround sound. I wanted to do it the right way because I didn't want to become a full-time cinematographer. I wanted to mend this piece to what we were doing great already and make it even better and offer more value to what we were doing. So during that time, I had taken some of my own personal money that I had stocked away, and I went out and I got some of the best gear that money could buy to accomplish that cinematic look and feel. And as I worked with this equipment, I understood that my existing computers were not up to spec to handle 4K, 6K, 8K cameras because they were just too slow. And so there was a couple of things I had to do to make that work. Specifically, I had to invent a product that did not exist. Now, we don't obviously shoot on film anymore. We don't use tape anymore. Everything's digital. So we use these cartridges, or magazines we call them, with SSD drives in them. They're very, very fast hard drives without mechanical moving parts, and they require very little power. Anyway, at the end of a shoot, if I was out for 2, 3, 4 days at a shoot, I'd end up with this big pile of magazines. Now I've got to offload it to the server, and I'm like, this is a pain in the butt. It's wasting my time. I'm sitting here waiting for things to transcode into the right format that I can edit them in, and so on and so forth. So I went to this little warehouse that was selling a lot of these old computers and server racks, stuff that was really out of date. And I mean, I was literally picking up full-blown HP, production servers out of a hospital that, for $20 a pop. I bought like 5 of them. So I brought them back. Some of the parts I took out, and I built my own server, and I built this very interesting, what I call the Adamus 8-bay cage. So I called Adamus, which is the company that we use to record it's the actual item that records our video. So again, I'm back to holding all these, and I'm like, how do I do this? So I made a cage that you just take all the magazines, plop them in, and the computer says, okay, I see what you're doing here. And I wrote software that says, okay, let me transcode this, and then the next one I'll do the next one and the next one. And then it puts it on another server, transcodes it ready for editing, and then when everything is verified that it's sitting in the right space, goes back to the cage, formats the drives, you can pull them out and you can put them right back in the camera again. So this process literally saved days and days of time. That innovation right there freed me up a little bit more. So the servers would work at night as they're chewing up the video files, and I could just take the drive right back out and go back out and shoot the next day. So it was very important that be put into place. Now, like I said, I talked to Adamus. No product like that exists, and they were very kind of interested in it. I don't know where it went. I have to follow up, but it's little things like that, and automating sales processes, not sales processes, production processes through Stream Deck and macros, and I'm the king of macros, by the way. So I literally
that's what that sounded like.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's what that was or not, but I'm like, you took a repetitive task, right? You program it at once, so now you don't have to keep doing it every day, right?
Yeah,
so that's fantastic.
You know, take the chamber for example. There's a lot of the things that have to be done, and they're generally the same. You know, it might be one little variable in there, but they're all the same. So I created a process, and literally it's a button. I push a button. And those things freed me up again to go out and meet with more people and create great video and learn. And I really wanted to further my education in the cinematic world. So that's pretty much where I'm at now. But again, it was a learning curve. It was a process. This is all new equipment. This is not, again, it's not something you just buy off the shelf. And so, you know, you have to take that time to learn it, and then you have to teach somebody on your staff how to use it.
That's incredible. Taking a process and automating it. Don't we hear about that all the time? And I mean, every business talks about that, but you actually did it, and now you've saved yourself literally days of time. So
yes.
Put in a little more effort up front, but right over the long haul, you're saving a huge amount of time, right?
That's correct.
So that's amazing. So what have you noticed as far as some of the challenges we had back a few months, roughly, I guess it would be March of this year, February, March, when we had some very big shifts due to this COVID-19 issue that's going on. I mean, what did you notice there, and what did you see personally as far as your business goes and things like that? What did you see?
Well, for one, we because we are not a brick and mortar, all of our employees are remote, and anything that we do, we're shooting off site. So we were already kind of prepared for this. What we weren't prepared for is the fact that everybody needed help getting set up to work remotely. That was the one. That was the first thing. They needed, you know, not your average CEO knows how to buy a web camera, like a webcam, or how to, you know, make sure your sound is right, and hey, don't use Wi-Fi, you should plug in, that kind of thing. A lot of people were not aware of these little tips and tricks. So these calls started funneling in, and I was asked to do these remote webinars with other companies that were having issues. They didn't know what to do. So I worked pretty closely with Tom McManaman on one of these projects, and it really sparked a new idea. And I'm very, very happy to take this on. So what we did was we call it virtual director. It may change. It's a new concept. But instead of having a live webinar feed of three people, three talking heads talking, we decided that, hey, why don't we interview each one of them? They can talk on the phone, but I'm going to get 3 separate feeds from them and let them go through their bullet points and let them talk on the topic at the same time. So now what I've got is 3 computers recording 3 different people. But because it's live, I'm capturing it in time code, and I can sync it up later, because now I have high quality video of each person. And now I can go back, edit it together, put in lower third graphics, make the sound great, put an audio bed there, put their slides in, and make it appear as though it's actually live, and then rebroadcast it as a live event. So this was very challenging because you know, I would pop my head up on camera and say, okay, all right, we got to stop that right there. Can you say that again? Or somebody's kid came in the room or something like that, which happens all the time. And if you look at the fails on YouTube, you look up Zoom fails, and you'll see all these little nuances that happen during a web conversation, and they're rather unfortunate. So I said, let's keep it professional. Let's do this the right way. The quality was better. The audio was great. I worked with each person to make sure that the cameras were capturing their best. A couple guys I had to I'm like, you got to turn your body around 180 degrees because there's a window behind you. And like, what kind of microphone do you have laying around? One guy had an old Radio Shack microphone, and we converted it with an adapter, and it improved his sound by 100%. I don't know. There was a lot of little nuances there that we had to overcome. And once we put that first piece together, it was amazing when it went out live, because, you know, what the user's seeing is pretty much a seamless webinar, and it didn't need to be live. Didn't need to be live, but you put it out there as a live thing. It notifies people that this particular person or company is live, and that it gets the same amount of attention.
Well, that's incredible. So I know you've done some innovation and really kind of taken what is many people are viewing as a negative experience, and I think you're showing some positive innovations that can come out of that. And I'm hoping that that's what a lot of us learn, right? I mean, none of us wanted this to happen, but I think there can be some positives come out of it. What do you think are some positives maybe you could share that companies should start thinking more about that maybe they weren't thinking about 3 or 4 months ago?
First, let me preface that by saying that I almost feel bad that there's like good friends of mine that are just out of work now. Some of them can't even collect unemployment, and they're struggling, and I recognize that, and I certainly didn't want to capitalize it and rub it on somebody's face. I just wanted to make sure our business was still up and running and trying to keep up with the trends. And fortunately, we're in that business that, we were kind of needed. And business literally at March doubled or maybe close to tripling in revenue because of this. Now, where do I think it's going? Let me give you an example. I think a lot of companies initially were very much against remote employees. Let me give you an example. The state, my better half works for the state. So, and trust me, she can't wait to get back to work. Now the state, because they never offered this before, or they did, and it was very limited, they're looking at the cost savings at this point of remote employees, and they're thinking, first of all, it seems as though our employees are actually working more hours. They're more productive for some reason, or at least some of them are, and we don't have to pay that overhead to put them in a cubicle and give them, keep the coffee flowing in the water cooler and all the expenses that come with having an employee in the office. So they're reconsidering that business model, okay, to have remote employees. So I think at some point, even companies that were completely against the idea are completely revamping their business model, saying we don't need to have this person in the office. As long as we can trust them, we put some good, solid policies in place, we can make sure that this happens. And that, in turn, is going to help my business in the long run, because now I can help set them up with video servers and their own ways of e-learning. And by the way, as another one of our big skill sets here is e-learning. We've set up servers just for that. But consider all those little factors that are going to save companies money, and I really do think that they're going to take that step. You're going to see a definite change.
Well, Rob, this has been amazing. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about all the different things you've been doing and some of the forward-looking things that I think a lot of business, I agree, that are going to look at incorporating, making themselves a little more efficiently. It'd be good for the company as well as for the employees when implemented correctly. You've been listening to Master Your Finances. You can listen to this podcast as well as all of our podcasts by going to masteryourfinances.us. Remember, together we can master your finances so you can enjoy financial peace of mind.